In this video, it's the new Hobbywing system. What do we have in here? That's the new 10.5 turn G3 motor and the XR10 Pro G3 speed control. These are brand new things, the newest addition from Hobbywing. I'm going to be putting them in my RC drift car and giving them a test. Let's get started by getting them out of the box. Starting with the speed control. New design that they have on this latest edition of these ESCs. Oh, look at that. Bigger footprint a little bit than I feel like the previous Pro. I'd have to go back and look at the specs side by side. But it feels like squatter. Like it's a little bit shorter, but whoop, it kind of blooped out a little bit. New fan design here with this integrated cover. Makes it look very modern. Very, very good, nice modern design here. And we still have our plug here in the front for our connection into our program card. We have the ability here to plug in a switch if you want a remote switch versus just a little on-off button right here on the front. Everything else is already soldered on. Of course, we're going to need to solder our ends on. So both our ends to the motor plus our battery leads, whatever we're going to use there, comes with the capacitor already in there and shrink wrapped nicely. Of course, our connection for our receiver. Manual in here is going to be nice and useful for us as we look at programming it. Fancy dancy stickers, and not 100% sure what these are. They look like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They look like replacement soldering cups on here. So maybe if you have to unsolder this and you have some kind of issues, you have new ends here that you can use. It's kind of nice of Hobbywing to provide that. Notable not in the box. Double check. Yep. Notably not in here anywhere is that external switch. I remember my previous versions came with that. I don't care. Never use it. I just use the switch that's on it itself. But I think that is interesting that they don't include it anymore, but yet still have the port for it. Ooh, that looks nice. Check that out. Put it up. Aha! That's not what I thought would happen. There you go. 10.5 turn. Little machined edges on here. Very open. Should be lighter weight than the predecessor. I always want to make sure that I have adjustable end bell timing, which of course it does. But that looks quite nice. Oh, we can even pull the little wrap off of it. There we go. That is one good looking motor. I will be very curious to see how it goes. Ooh, thankfully, inside they do provide a sensor wire. I always forget to buy a sensor wire. So thank you, Hobbywing, for providing one. And then, of course, user manual. Not needed as much, of course, on a motor itself versus the ESC. But definitely something that we can check through. Also rebuildable and tunable with different rotors on the inside. So all of that is really great. Bolting the motor in, just 2 screws right here. In my kit for this is the Sakura D6, it does come with a 25 tooth pinion. So that's what I'm going to run here to start. Obviously, you will need to change up or down depending on the size of your track, how you're driving, surfaces, all that kind of stuff. If someone online tells you what gear to run, they're probably lying to you because there's no way they can know your exact situation. My high recommendation for anybody is get a bunch of pinions, do some testing, find out for your exact car, your driving style, your track, your surface, what the best gearing is for you. I've used double-sided tape to mount the ESC. This car has an ESC tray back there. Chassis has some holes here where you can actually pass 3 wires through, so I did that. Keep them in order so I know which one goes where. We have pre-tinned the pads here on the motor so that we can easily solder each one of the motor wires there. As a reminder, A, B, and C from the ESC matter when it comes to a sensored motor as to which one you put in order. A from the ESC has to go to A on the motor. Otherwise, the sensor setup is going to be very, very confused and you have risk damaging either the motor or the ESC. When it comes to the battery side of the ESC, you have many different choices that you can use to solder on here. XT60s, Deans. I prefer 4mm bullets. That way I can just connect them straight into the battery and we don't worry with any other kind of adapters or anything like that. And that's because typically in the drift cars we'll be running the shorty batteries with the 4 or 5mm bullets anyway. If you put the 4mm on here, they'll go to just about any battery, including some more budget-oriented ones. If you do 5s, then you can only go to certain batteries, and you can get some really cheap 4 to 5mm sleeves so that you can use them on both if you go with the 4. So that's what I will be doing. Just like that, bullets are soldered on. Cut the little red tab here. I think those look great. Now this is typically not what I would recommend, and you see that I left them the factory length and just pulled them over here. My whole wire management is going to change because I'm going to change some things around on this car. If you are going to run bullets, I would suggest that what you do is something like my negative lead here looks like it's a good distance. So I like that, but what I would typically do is shorten up this positive lead so that it can't do anything, it can't reach over here. It can only reach over here. That's typically what I would do. It keeps you from accidentally shorting these together. It keeps you from accidentally plugging the ESC in backwards. Yeah, we've done it. I've done it. My son's done it. It sucks when you do that. So lengthening those wires to just the right length is really good. Now I plan to make this rear motor at some point, so I don't want to go ahead and prematurely shorten the wires. Now for calibrating this Hobbywing ESC to the controller, we're going to turn the controller on first, and then we're going to hit the power button on the ESC, and we're going to hold it down until it beeps and flashes. Now with it beeping and in neutral, we hit the button once, move the throttle to full throttle. It gets 2 beeps, move the throttle to reverse or full brake. We get 3 beeps, and we should be back up in business. Now we get to program the ESC because we have forward with a really delayed turbo in there, really delayed boost, and we have no reverse. So we need to get the programmer out for the ESC. To program the ESC, we're going to pull out this little rubber plug right here, and we're going to plug in our multifunction box. Now when we fire the ESC back up, it'll recognize it. It'll try to connect to the ESC, and I'm going to be really curious if this LCD program box can, because this is a much older design versus this new XR10 ESC. So it might not be able to see it. Oh, it won't connect to it. Boo. Good news for me, I also have the little Hobbywing OTA programmer, so I can open that. I think it's this thing. And we can come into parameters, connect to the ESC, and we can do a whole bunch of very simple tunings here at the very beginning. Just a tip, I had to go in and force an update to the Hobbywing app in order to get it to connect with the OTA to this new ESC. It would connect otherwise, but it wouldn't read any of the settings in here. Obviously, the parameters reading with this new ESC was not in the previous version of the app. So, few things, now that that's all sorted out, that I'm going to change in here. I'm going to change the settings mode into advanced to give me more options down here. The second thing is I'm going to give myself reverse, because reverse is fun. I'm going to turn the max reverse force down to about 50% because we just don't need that much power. I personally do not like to run drag brake, so we're going to turn the drag brake off. First glance, what we're going to do is I'm going to start at 15 degrees boost and 15 degrees turbo. I will let it be auto activated. Turbo timing, we'll put that at 15. 30 degrees on the motor to get started. Honestly, all these are just absolute baselines, and then we'll tune from there. Turbo will be instant on. We, at that point, should be good. Save the parameters. Save successfully. Sweet, we are ready to give this thing a test drive. Even though I set the turbo to come on as instant, I think the build rate that it had was a little soft. So that's one thing that we're going to have to put in there. The other thing is I keep triggering low voltage cutoff, even with some really good batteries in here. So with my auto low voltage cutoff, I think we're going to have to go back and double check and maybe raise that to just a finite amount. far as volts per cell that it detects. Because even with a mostly charged battery, I'm clipping low voltage cutoff. Like right there, I have no turbo or boost, because even with a mostly charged battery, it won't take it. A couple simple changes here. I just told it to set the low voltage cutoff to 6.8 just as a hard number to see what difference that makes. And then down here in turbo, instead of the increase rate was at 20 degrees 0.1 second, I just made it as instant, and then that way it should be no delay and it should hit all the 15 degrees all at once. So I fired this up. The drive frequency, I'm going to try to up that. It comes at 16,000. I'm going to bring it up to 32,000. That's going to create a lot more heat, but we're going to try that to see what it does. We're also going to change here the throttle rate control. So normal is 20. The higher you go, the harder it hits when you hit the throttle. I still feel, even though I've got turbo on instant and some of that kind of stuff, it still feels a little weak when I hit full throttle. So I'm going to up both of those at first, and we're going to try those. So let's give it a shot and see what it feels like. Okay, now after a bunch of testing, here are the results that I've come up with that you can't probably read on the camera at all. So of course I put it into the advanced mode in order to be able to get to all of the settings. I've changed it to forward, reverse with brake so that I could actually back out of issues. Cutoff voltage, I'm still messing with actually. It still seems like for whatever reason it's cutting off, even though I've changed the number, it's still cutting off really high. I'm kind of surprised by that. I do have the throttle rate control all the way up at 26 in order to kind of give it a little bit more punch once I actually hit the full throttle, but I have not changed anything on the throttle curve at all. I've left it at the 1.1 for now. On the pulse width drive frequency, I went all the way up to the 32,000. Drag brake force, I changed to 0% to get rid of drag brake. Obviously that's a tuning aid. Some people like it, some don't. On boost timing, I ended up going all the way down to just about like 5 degrees. So basically almost no boost. And what I did instead is I ended up putting a bunch more of that timing over into turbo instead, making sure that that was a instant as far as delay and an instant as far as increase rate, and that seemed to give me more of that kick of the turbo that I was really looking for. I may still continue to adjust this a little bit, maybe continuing to even take more out of boost period and adding more into the turbo. We will see, continue to test it. But at the end of the day, if you are using this Hobbywing and you're looking for some initial setting points, this is at least what I'm using. It doesn't mean that it's right for you. Obviously, you still need to do your own testing and see what works. Okay, final verdict on this motor and ESC combo is that it does the thing, and it's really, really good. But here's the kind of the conflict here. If you're looking for a drift setup, Hobbywing makes a drift-specific setup, the XR10. Beautiful anodized aluminum. You can get it in colors. You can do all that kind of stuff. Has a motor that pairs with it that's just absolutely gorgeous. It has basically all the same tuning features. You can do all the same things you can with this ESC, but they're more expensive. It's $340. So I very, very rarely suggest that folks actually get the XD10 setup because you don't get that much for all the extra money. It's $340 when you add that motor and ESC together. This setup is $290. So that is, I mean, so you're saving $50. If you're thinking about getting the XD10, get this instead. It has a bunch of power. It has a lighter footprint. It doesn't look as fancy, but you save $50. But the biggest issue for drifting with this motor and ESC combo is that they still sell the XR10 stock spec. And the stock spec, again, you lose just a little bit of features that basically don't make any difference, and you save an additional $60. So now you're all the way, you're 110 under the XD setup, and you're another 60 under this setup. So my recommendation to 99% of the folks out there is that if you don't want absolutely every bell and whistle, and you want a smaller footprint, and you want to be able to drift just fine, get the XR10 stock spec. It does everything you need. Not the just stock. Now, just be very, very clear. They also have an XR10 just stock, which is super confusing between just stock and stock spec. The just stock has no boost or turbo and all that kind of stuff. You don't want that one. So I'm going to leave a link to all of these combos down in the video description. Then that way you can see them firsthand, compare some of the specs yourself so that you can make an informed decision, not just take my word for it. But now, if you do want to see, I've tested these other ESCs and motors, and they're all in my Drift Tech playlist. So if you're curious to see those, they'll be right over here, popping up in this playlist. Hope to see you in one of those videos. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.